Hello folks, and welcome back to another Sail and Chat episode. But before I get into anything today, I would first like to offer my prayers to the people of France, and in particular the people who are in Paris. I was busy recording the footage from the game, which I'll be doing a review of in a second. This game called Steel Ocean. And just as I was about to start recording my voice over it, the news came in from France that this whole attack had happened, and basically I kind of was in shock, muted horror, whichever word I can say there to describe how I was feeling. And initially it was just shock and horror until I also realized that my best friend and her husband happened to be there as well, and they were there for the France-Germany soccer game where the explosions happened. So of course, was extremely worried for a little bit, although they are confirmed to be safe. But of course, if you are there, stay safe. But stay strong, stay united. Can't say don't be afraid, because realistically speaking, who isn't? But stay strong. The world is definitely with all of you. Okay, so on to one other piece of news. My internet was down for like 2.5 weeks, and that was just pain in the neck. But they have fixed it, at least to the best of my knowledge. It seems to be fixed. So do expect me to resume my regular schedule, and I'll be getting videos up and everything. Alright, so World of Warships released patch 5.1. which when I tested on the public test server was like an amazing patch, and then somehow when they implemented it, something went wrong, and it's just completely like, it was initially like a completely mess of a patch. They were reasonably fast at getting it fixed, and so with patch 5.1.1, they did fix some stuff like battleship armor piercing, and things are a little bit better in that regards, although there are still a number of really annoying problems, namely the dogfighting skill bug on carriers. That's kind of annoying. There is still the fact that there is no smoke, and at long range I have absolutely no idea what the heck I'm shooting at. So hopefully those will get fixed in the next patch, but I'm not really sure, but we'll see. I'm just hoping it'll actually get fixed. Aside from that, I believe on the European server right now, they are selling the Polish destroyer, and they're also selling that Russian battleship. So of course, if you are interested in purchasing one of those ships, absolutely go ahead and go for it. So that's pretty much all the news really that I have with regards to warships, because today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to review this game that's come out pretty recently, and it's by I believe a Chinese developer, and it's called Steel Ocean. Now if you look at the game, it kind of looks like World of Warships, kind of a little bit like World of Tanks, but obviously just kind of World of Tanks on water. And it's also got elements of Battlestations Midway and Battlestations Pacific. And this is just a training mission right now that I'm playing in this game. And it's, it kind of looks like World of Warships, although here you can tell when, you're firing, especially if you're in a cruiser or a heavy cruiser or a battleship, you get this overhead view, which is kind of like artillery from World of Tanks. That's why I kind of said it was kind of like World of Tanks on water, more so than World of Warships. Furthermore, one of the other things that kind of gives away the World of Tanks sort of connection is the amount of damage that you actually do. I could be top of the team in terms of experience and stuff, and at the end I would have done like 3,300 damage, which is much more similar to the kind of damage numbers that you see in World of Tanks than in World of Warships. Now let's take a look at one of those features that is in Steel Ocean that's not in World of Warships. So Steel Ocean actually has submarines. Now before I talk about submarines, and it's going to be a while before I get into any sort of action, let me sort of go over the list of pros and cons that I managed to sort of get a feel for in the roughly 2.5-ish hours that I played this game. So the gameplay itself isn't bad. It's a little bit faster paced than World of Warships. Like it's kind of again more similar to World of Tanks in the terms of the pacing. Engagements are a lot closer up. Where World of Warships you can have engagements 20 kilometers. In this particular game, it seems like a lot of the engagements, at least at the lower tiers, were much closer. Oftentimes even within 2-3 kilometers. So it could be, it's very close sometimes in this game. This results in a game that's, from my experience with it so far, faster paced than World of Warships. In fact, its pacing is more similar to World of Tanks, which is where I think this game kind of borrows many of its elements. What this results in is a game that is reasonably fun. I actually did have fun in the 2 hours that I spent playing it. Of course, I didn't get to really high tiers, so I'm not sure what the end tiers of this game will be like, but my experience in the 2.5 hours I played it was that this is a reasonably enjoyable game, and I wouldn't mind playing it a little bit more. The ships, however, are a little bit faster. World of Warships, like you can go, let's say 18 knots, your ship feels very slow. In Steel Ocean, at like even 17 knots, the ship still felt reasonably fast, so there's definitely that sort of zippier, faster feel to the ships, which also causes it to be a little bit more this arcade kind of feel, where everything kind of behaves like they really don't have that mass. And I guess if you're just into that whole fast-paced naval combat game, then this one's perfectly okay in that regard. But a lot of you are probably asking, well, what about these submarines? What's your opinion on them? And were they implemented okay? What? Well, I think the submarines were implemented okay. I mean, they can be reasonably easily hunted by destroyers, cruisers, and even other submarines. Although if you happen to catch a battleship all by itself, then it's pretty much happy times, as there's very little the battleship can actually do, as you'll see soon, because I will be sneaking up on battleships. I am basically, in this battle, just to explain quickly what I'm doing, I'm sneaking down one side away from where my team is, and hopefully trying to get around them and just get to their battleships. And you'll see how much fun I have when I actually get close, and there's very little the battleships could do. The submarines they're not overpowered, at least I didn't feel them to be overpowered at the low tiers. Not sure what's going to be like at the higher tiers when they have front and rear torpedoes. And the torpedoes do significant amounts of damage, mind you, as in 4 torpedoes into a battleship at low tier and the battleship is either crippled or dead. So it definitely is a very powerful ship. However, submarines do have their weaknesses, which means, if they run up against cruisers and destroyers, they are relatively easy prey. This, of course, does bring up the question, do I think that World of Warships can implement submarines in a similar manner to the way that Steel Ocean has done it, and would it really be a good idea? My answer is not really well suited for World of Warships. Some of the issues that I had when I was playing Steel Ocean was the quick realization that, hang on a minute, all the little ships that were really capable of protecting battleships kind of took off at the beginning of the battle to go do other stuff. So as long as I avoided all the little ships and I took my submarine around them and I just snuck up behind the battleships, there's very little the battleships could actually do. Which means it's not really fun getting nuked from something that is absolutely invisible, that you absolutely cannot get any shots in. It's like fighting the stealth destroyers in World of Warships, but even worse because you just never see them at all, and suddenly there are torpedoes that pop up that you really can't do anything to dodge. So that alone, I think, is one of the reasons why I would not like to see submarines in World of Warships. However, I do have to say that in the way that Steel Ocean has had their gameplay overall, I do think they implemented submarines reasonably well, so I at least have to give them credit for that. Aside from all that, every other ship, and I did only play battleships and destroyers, and I played a cruiser in a training battle. I do feel like all the ships do kind of have their own roles in the battle, so I think in that way that's good as well, because you're not going to be in a ship where you feel like you don't do anything at all, which is something that I hope that World of Warships can maybe improve on, because you'll have situations in World of Warships where you have cruisers, like an American cruiser, that gets into a battle where there's no aircraft, and all of a sudden you're not really that good, especially at the higher tiers. So hopefully in the future it'll be something that World of Warships can improve on as well, and in a way borrowing from a game that essentially borrowed a lot from, you know, various wargaming titles. So I think that there's, you know, competition, especially this kind of healthy competition, I think is good for both games. I think this game will get better, and I think World of Warships will get better as well, trying to figure out where, you know, Steel Ocean has done things better. Here's what I'm talking about here. See the battleship over there? I'm a submarine. I don't think the battleship spotted me, although I can't really tell, but I'm able to sneak up on this battleship, and this battleship has absolutely no clue. And I can sneak up on them and get torpedoes off. Oh, I do have to mention one thing though. The submarines in this game do have notoriously short ranges in terms of spotting. They just can't really seem to see anything until something's kind of right in their face. So, you know, there's definitely a spotting mechanic as well in Steel Ocean, although their spotting mechanic again feels a lot more like World of Tanks spotting mechanics, as in you could be like 4 kilometers from something and it completely disappears. In this case, you'll see I'll get to, I think it's like a kilometer or something from that battleship before I pick it up again. It's just, it was like, wow, I can't see something that's like right there. And that could be a little bit frustrating as well, because you have absolutely no idea where things are. And for a battleship that's pretty big, it shouldn't really be that difficult to spot. Maybe this is just their way of reducing the effectiveness of submarines, although I'm not 100% sure. Still, like I said earlier, you know, their submarine implementation wasn't too bad. Ooh, okay, here's the fun part. Watch. I'm gonna get like really close, and I could launch my torpedoes here, but the ships do tend to accelerate reasonably fast, so I don't want to give this battleship any chance at all at escaping. Now you're probably also wondering, like, what the hell, why is this battleship stopped? And that's because, like I said, it's very similar to the RD system in World of Tanks, where you have that circle that slowly shrinks until you get a very nicely calibrated shot. But to get there, a lot of times moving your ship around and maneuvering is a pretty bad idea. Anyhow, I sneak to like 500 meters, fire off 4 torpedoes, and nuke off most of the HP on that battleship. And there's not much this battleship can do. And trying to run away doesn't really work, because the submarine isn't that slow, and the torpedo reload is reasonably fast. And so, of course, in approximately another 20 seconds, if nobody else shoots this battleship, I would have been able to get off more torpedoes. However, somebody does shoot the battleship, and so, of course, somebody else does get the kill. There was also one other thing I did actually like about Steel Ocean, which I hope World of Warships can actually implement, which is that when their cruisers and destroyers fire their torpedoes, they can actually fire off individual torpedoes and not just fire off all 3 or all 4 at once. They can actually just fire off one at a time and then realign individual torpedoes and have them go in different directions. I do think that would actually help if I was playing, let's say, a destroyer in World of Warships. It would just make the destroyer play a little bit more skill-based. You can feign a torpedo here and then have torpedoes go the other way. So I think that is something that maybe World of Warships can borrow from Steel Ocean and maybe improve upon their own game that way. Now, in terms of cons, one of the most obvious ones is the fact that Steel Ocean's graphics are not that nice, and you know, it's one of those games that you look at and it's just not visually impressive by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of things are very rough, and it just doesn't look that good. However, if you're one of those people that cares about gameplay more than graphics, which you know, for me that's actually more important, then the graphics really isn't that big of a deal. There is one thing that did bother me, which was the rather poor optimization of the game, which again, it's still early on in the game's development, I guess, so I do expect that the optimization problems will get a bit better. There are other things, for example, like I mentioned earlier, battleship play feels very, very static. A lot of times as a battleship, you're just kind of trying to stay out of trouble, away from little ships that can torpedo you. And that makes battleship play feel very boring. Though the one time I tried a battleship, I just didn't feel like I really moved much, just kind of stayed in the same general area and just shot at stuff from long range. The game has premium things, premium consumables, premium ammunition, and the ammunition I don't think provided a huge improvement over the free-to-use ammunition. In terms of penetration, there was a little bit more. In terms of damage, there was a little bit more. So that wasn't that bad, although I wasn't really that happy with the way that they implemented the premium consumables, because for gold you could get consumables that significantly outperformed the ones that you could get for free. And so I feel like that would provide people who decide to spend money and sort of a huge advantage, shall we say, in battle compared to people who didn't use the premium consumables. But all that is acceptable because, you know, all of those things I'm okay with. Even the premium ammunition, the premium consumables, I'm okay with that. But there is one thing that I really, really dislike about Steel Ocean. And the thing I disliked about Steel Ocean had to do with the way that crew was implemented in the game. Crew has different rarities. You've got common, you've got slightly superior, then there's like elite, and so on and so forth. And then the top tier is legendary. So how do you acquire this kind of crew? Well, you can get up to, I believe, an elite crew by just using something called merits, although I didn't manage to get any of it. I think it has something to do with quest completion. But to get anything like a legendary crew, you had to spend real money to basically open what can be described as like a capsule system. You open packs and maybe you get lucky and you land one of those legendary captains. And these captains provide a pretty big advantage, because even with a 3-star captain, which I got during a training mission, a 3-star captain had a skill that could buff your speed by 15% while making you take 15% more damage. So if you put that, let's say, onto a submarine, your submarine would go quite a bit faster. So I can only imagine what a 5-star legendary crew would be like, and that is basically, you know, the thing that I dislike the most, is that for me to be really competitive, I'm going to have to spend money. Aside from that, however, I do think that Steel Ocean is actually a fun game. So, you know, if you are looking into an, sort of alternative naval game that you can play, I would say go give Steel Ocean a try to see how you enjoy it. Alright folks, that pretty much does it for the Steel Ocean review. Let's move on to some of your questions. Our very first question comes in from Daniel Berry, who's wanting me to comment on high tier repair costs. And Daniel's finding that at the higher tiers, especially with ships like the Yamato, the North Carolina, the Mogami, they're fun to play, but they don't generate a lot of credits. And I guess Daniel's wondering whether I support lowering repair costs. As a player, absolutely. I play high tier ships. I would love it if I could just play them all the time. But I do think it's part of Wargaming's design in sort of all their games to have people not just get to the high tiers and then stay there permanently, and that they can actually populate the lower tier player base, so that there's more people there for people to play with, and that high tiers is purely a thing you run occasionally. So I think that's their design, and I don't think they're really going to change that, although I would love it if they did. It just means I could just play my high tiers more often. Next up, we have two questions, one from Phobios TG and the other one from Nick Fike, who both asks me about ranked battles. And so Phobios asked me about how do I feel about it and why I don't seem to play many ranked battles. And Phobios, that's because on the NA server, the ranked population is really low. And I got up to rank 12, and I couldn't progress much further just because there weren't that many people on. It's only later that I find out that there was a very small select group of people that had, created their own channel to play at only certain times, and then they were able to get battles. But other than that, there just weren't enough battles that I could get in ranked, and that's why you don't see me playing them all that much, although I do personally love playing them. Nick Fike, that's exactly the problem I had. Actually, at the lower ranks, up to about rank 15, I think battles were still relatively easy to come by. But once you get up to the high ranks, just no way. So I feel like what's going to happen is that when they implement like proper rewards and stuff, and there's actually going to be like prizes, and not just like credit prizes or flags, but like ships and stuff, you're going to see a lot more people playing ranked. I think when that happens, the ranked queue times will decrease substantially. The next question comes from Ishan Raj, who is wondering about tips on how to play the Cleveland, what commander skills to get, and also what upgrades to get on the Cleveland. Well, I would say in terms of commander skills, for the first row, get basic firing training or situational awareness, your pick. In the second row, get expert marksman. Third row, get superintendent. Fourth row, get either advanced firing training or demolition expert, depending on which of those two you prefer, either having more range and better AA, or having slightly higher chances of setting stuff on fire. And finally, in the fifth row, I would say get concealment expert. And all of these skills, because they are viable when you end up getting to the late game ships like the Baltimore and the Des Moines. In terms of modules, it's relatively straightforward. You start off with the main battery modification 1, then you have a choice of either getting the AA modification 2, or you get the gunfire control system modification 1. Again, for AA for better AA, and the fire control if you want to have your guns be a little bit more accurate. And then it's just damage control module and the steering module, and that's pretty much it for the Cleveland. The most important one is the decision whether you want AA or more accuracy. In terms of actually playing the Cleveland, well, the Cleveland's a really strong ship, and is actually way stronger than the other ships at her tier. But tips is, make sure you get the upgraded guns first of all. That extra rate of fire is going to help a lot. Make sure if you run into a battleship, you just spam lots of HE. Make sure you can set multiple fires. So learn about the different sections of a ship you can set fires to. There's 4 in total. And also, if you're running into cruisers and stuff, make sure you fire AP and you know how to hit their citadels. Of course, if you don't know how to do that effectively, you might want to quickly check the Captain's Academy video on citadeling. Other than that, the Cleveland is a fantastic ship, and you should be able to do well with her. Oh, one other thing. Don't try to stay too far. The Cleveland doesn't do well at super long ranges because the arc of the guns are so ridiculously high. Other than that, that's pretty much it for the Cleveland, so, go out there, have some fun, and good luck with it. Orange Phoenix asks, do I think that the Royal Navy might be one of the hardest trees to implement because it had so many ships? And whether or not Wargaming would miss quite a few and annoy people? Well, Orange Phoenix, here's what I will say. I think that the Royal Navy might be a challenging line. Not because they have so many ships that, maybe Wargaming will miss them, but because they have ships that are a little bit odd in terms of placement. Like, if you think, for example, the Nelson class battleships, which have the 16-inch guns, that should put them along with the other 16-inch gun ships, let's say the Nagato, and so at least tier 7, right? But the King George V class battleships, which were newer than the Nelsons, were equipped with only 14-inch guns, and there's no way you can take a 14-inch gun battleship up to tier 8. They just would struggle with dealing with the battleship armor up at that tier. However, the King George V class ships also not really fit at tier 6, where the other 14-inch gun battleships are, because their armor will be so much better than all of these other ships. So I do think that the Royal Navy is going to pose an interesting challenge for Wargaming when they try to implement that particular navy into World of Warships. And the last part of your question deals with, do I have any resources that deal with prototype British cruisers? And I haven't really seen anything like that, but I will keep an eye open for you. If I find anything, I will be sure to let you know. Hopefully that answers all of your questions with regards to potentially the interesting implementation of the Royal Navy. Our very last question of the day comes from ZeroKiller1628, who's wondering, do I think things like searchlights and radar should be implemented to spice up night combat? I would love that, actually. I would love it. It would make night battles look so much cooler. However, I'm not sure if you mean by implementing those items to actually change the way the game works, because to the best of my knowledge right now, that isn't likely to happen. We're not likely to see any sort of like statistical change to the ship's parameters with the implementation of nighttime. So while it's a great thing to have, and maybe it would be nice cosmetically to see like searchlight beams and everything, for now I think the way that Wargaming has implemented night maps is that it's a purely cosmetic thing and it doesn't actually affect any of the ships. So hopefully that answers your question, Zero Killer. Well folks, that brings us to the end of the Sail and Chat episode. Of course, if you have further questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Hope you enjoyed the review of Steel Ocean. Have a great weekend, and look forward to talking to you all again soon.